And now we are moving to policy discourse, and our first line of call is oil firms must supply local refineries or lose export permits, the NUPRC, and why Trump's oil price cut won't budge Nigeria. That's coming from OPEC. Mr. Trump removed or cut, says, let me use this word, drill, baby, drill. So that's what we are going to.
Doc likes that.
That's what we are going to do. And sometimes when he's giving his speech, I wonder if he actually goes with the script. But I think it does.
Can Trump comply with his scripts?
I'm sure he can.
He will go off script. He definitely would go off script.
And he will come back, because during his presidential debate delivery, I saw that it was, even though he was changing positions, he was glued to the screen. And whenever he uses his own words, you could see that from his body language. So OPEC is saying Nigerians shouldn't have anything to fear, Doc. Do you align yourself with that perspective?
Well, there's everything to fear, and there's everything to worry about. And like I have said here on this table, Donald Trump is a strong negotiator. And what he's determined to do is to see that prices of goods and services come down, that nobody is holding any other person to ransom as prices are concerned. So I think what is going to happen, there are talks with his allies, and that was why he made it very clear that he was wondering that after his elections that Saudi Arabia should have known. And they didn't need to expect that he come before they pulled down the prices of crude in the market. And I think that's good for everybody, and even including us who are sitting down on this table. Because right now that the market forces are determining prices, the lower the crude, of course, the better it is for the consuming public. Although when crudes are high, nations make more money really. But how that translates into the pocket of an average individual is something that has to be said on another day. But what Trump is doing is that they are also huge consumer of this export of crude from this OPEC country, because they have been buying in reserve. And he's saying now he wants to show up his reserve, and he too wants to pump out crude. The law of supply and demand is what it is.
Well, as long as the people are going to be the one to benefit from it, I don't
so
have
the
any
law of
problem
supply and demand says that if you have so much goods,
you should have it cheaper.
Chasing very few buyers, then of course the prices will naturally crash. And that is what we are going to see. And for every word he says, I think he seems to have an idea of what he wants to do. Because if the last 4 years he did before Joe Biden came in is anything to go by, is to see that Donald Trump is insisting that we have some things that we can use, and we cannot allow our people to be suffering while we are investing in very expensive technology and energy, where there's something that can be cheaper, that can make life more meaningful for the American people. And I think that's where they are also looking at an American who is incurring more debt by investing in buying crude when they could actually sell crude.
Okay, I
think that even Trump asking that OPEC and Nigeria, as well as other oil-producing countries, reduce the price of oil.
Nigeria is not even in the question because we don't even have so much to sell.
No, I'm saying, but he mentioned that they should reduce the price of oil. OPEC, Nigeria is also part of OPEC now, so he was asking, and he was saying that he expected that by now they should have done that. Why haven't they already reduced the price of oil? Because he's saying that if they reduce the price of oil, it will affect Russia, and so reducing the price of oil will be equal to ending the war. But OPEC differs in that view. It's just that, yes, Trump is a strong talker and is also a strong leader, but there are times when Trump sort of wants to step out of line and act like he is the world president, even when he says America would be for America. So how are you the president of America and also wanting to give what sounds like an instruction to OPEC and to the world because you think that's what will
Like,
end?
I am becoming president. Why are you not taking the price down?
He doesn't have a right to even say that. Now, if it's an appeal
because
to
there's a consequence.
if it's an appeal to OPEC, and OPEC has even reasoned that
No.
they would not even do that, and I don't see how dropping the price would automatically stop the war. And even if it does, there are several other countries that will suffer for it because oil still remains a major earner for some countries. Countries like Nigeria, are you saying that Nigeria should have less income because you want to stop the war in Ukraine? What is Nigeria's participation in the war in Ukraine? There are other diplomatic avenues that can be explored. There are other avenues that can be employed. Why not stop the aid that you're giving to Ukraine that is also fueling the crisis? Why ask that OPEC reduce the cost of oil? So I'm glad that OPEC did not even consider that decision.
Okay,
That's the
but-
suggestion.
But
Doc.
OPEC don't need to consider the decision. And when you know how international negotiation happens, you will understand that Donald Trump is making some very strong statements. I've said it on this table. Elementary international relations study says foreign policies are extensions of your own domestic policies. Whether you like it or not, America is still the richest country in the world. Whether you like it or not, they are still the most profitable people in the world in terms of success. They have a whole lot that the world need. And so what he's saying is that you need me. And if you need me, then we have to be on the same plane. And what this means for the OPEC nations is the fact that you're also having somebody who is taking enough from you and is saying, henceforth I'll take. So it's like, that's where really, yes, good, great. But you also saw why they read post things you don't want to miss. Spoke about the conversation with Netanyahu of getting into Gaza. And you remember how the blockade of the Suez Canal led to hike in prices because of the terrorist activities in the Suez Canal. So you are seeing a Trump that said, oh, we want to take over Gaza, because actually what he's looking at is that canal, so that there are flow of trade, that people take advantage of these disruptions for price hike. So what you're going to see is that people are going to talk. Somebody wrote yesterday and said the president of China eventually talked down because he knows that they will lose more than America will lose if the trade war starts. Other nations are backing down. So he's not just talking. He's saying that I have what it takes in my hand to condition what can happen to you. So you come down to table, let's talk about it.
Okay. Whilst the China has responded by imposing some form of tariff on the United States, most especially 15% for some of the exports coming to China and 10% for some of those exports too. I want to see these as Trump and America is going to gain, because I think it's benefit for the world. Nigerians should be praying that America start drilling right away, because when they start drilling, the price of oil is going to continue to crash, most especially when OPEC countries and including Nigeria begin to raise up their capacity to produce more locally. That is going to influence the international market and to be good for the people at the end of society.
How would that be good for Nigeria?
I would like us to get this information from the horse's mouth. That's from the United States President Donald Trump, where he made this speech, which we are currently addressing as a policy issue. And here's what he said.
I'm also going to ask Saudi Arabia and OPEC to bring down the cost of oil. You got to bring it down, which frankly, I'm surprised they didn't do before the election. That didn't show a lot of love by them not doing it. I was a little surprised by that. If the price came down, the Russia-Ukraine war would end immediately. Right now, the price is high enough that that war will continue. You got to bring down the oil price. You got to end that war.
Welcome back. Many thanks for joining us. Blessing.
So that's the president of the United States, Donald Trump, talking about why he wants OPEC and the oil-producing nations to reduce the price of oil, and saying if they had done that already, the war in between Russia and Ukraine would have ended by now. But I doubt that sincerely, because I know that energy is a big source of revenue for Russia, because that's part of the reason Europe could not really hold strongly over Russia to say you must end the war. Because when they did, they know that Russia supplies most of the gas that they use, and Russia gets a lot of revenue from gas. So they wanted to target that and say crash oil price, so less revenue comes for them, and that will lead to Putin not being able to fund the war. But like I said, there's also a lot that they need to do to ensure that war stops, and not just targeting oil price. But if you look at crashing oil price, for now, that would not favor Nigeria. What is the 2025 budget benchmark against? $75 per barrel. That's what Nigeria benchmark their 2025 budgets. So at the time that crude oil price rose to $85, it was good news for Nigeria, because that means more revenue would come, even if there would also be a consequence because the pump price of petrol would increase. But at least the federal government gets more revenue. Right now, we are not even producing up to 2 million barrels.
We're not producing up to 1.5 million.
No, let's even use what the federal government is targeting, 2 million barrels. We are not even producing up to that. So it means that if oil price declines, we'll get less revenue. If we're producing more, we'll say because we're producing more, that would compensate for a less price, when we have a less price. But right now, we're not producing enough, so we need as much revenue as we can get. So reducing oil price will not be in the favor of Nigeria, for instance. That's so right now, it is not something that we can afford to do. If we have built capacity, enough capacity for local refining, and we've also increased production, and Trump is saying this, we can then be saying, okay, maybe we would consider that. But for now, it's not in our favor. It will be premature for us to do that because we want to end the war. There isn't much that is in need for us at the moment.
I wasn't talking about any. Sorry, Doc, just a moment. I wasn't talking about ending the war. Should be about ending war.
The conversation of Donald Trump to the World Economic Forum was about the war in Russia.
But that was what he cited. That's the core issue.
You have to put it within context. He said so many things at the conference, and this is just one aspect of it. He also talked about third world countries reducing taxes, which is of course at the root of an interest rates, which is killing and raising poverty in society. And I think is that economic point of view we're going to be evaluating what Donald Trump is saying. That what you find, for example, in third world, and I tried to remember the name of this congressman in America who was speaking on the floor of Congress once and said to the American Congress, Africans don't need aid. What Africans need is reduction in rate of borrowing, lending rates. That the more we borrow money to poor countries, the more they struggle to prove to the West that they have the capacity to pay back. And what that leads to is that it leads to increase in taxation, it leads to increase in rate of borrowing, it leads to devaluation and the rest of things that actually make life unbearable for the people who live in those climes. And it is within that economic space we're going to be looking at what Donald Trump is talking about. Now, when we look at the rate of inflation that is high globally, in the US they're talking about 2%, in Nigeria we're talking about food inflation that's almost 40%. So whatever thing that we're looking at, if the oil price is actually stable at 82, we pay more actually. And of course, the already poor people in Nigeria don't even have the money to pay that. So what that means for us is that, yes, it may seem as if your government is earning more, but your people are becoming poorer. So how do we reduce poverty in our environment? Is to situate things that, for example, exchange rate goes down drastically. Now, when you look at, for example, between 2015 and 2025, and you look at the rate at which prices had increased, you find that the average man, especially in the third world, don't have capacity to buy. And now, if people don't have capacity to buy, you also can connect poverty with insecurity. That's also global. So these are some of the things that we must have to address. Take, for example, we are seeing Africans who are even recruiting their sons and daughters to go fight on the side of Russia, some fighting on the side of Ukraine. And all these things are made possible because people are desperate, because they have nothing to live for, so they can die for anything. As much as Donald Trump is seeking for prosperity for the American citizen, he is also advocating for prosperity for the citizens of the world. And the only way to get this done is by getting rate down, getting prices down, and so things become affordable.
Okay, but you know what? All of that cannot happen right now, because even when you talk about reducing poverty, part of the reason why there is high inflation in Nigeria is because we are largely still an import-dependent nation. And a lot of importation is done with the dollars. And we don't even have that liquidity in the economy. And that's why you see that the exchange rate is still very high. Now, what is the major source through which the government, through which dollars come into the economy? It's from the sales of oil. Now, if oil price comes lower, right now we cannot even afford to be looking at bringing oil price, because we are still battling with a lot that cannot function with what he's saying. Ideally, if we had certain conditions right, we could do that. But right now, that is not an option for Nigeria to even consider. That's what I'm saying.
Okay.
Yeah,
no. Just a moment. Let me come in. Wait. No, because I know.
Just 1 minute. I'll get back to you. Just to say this right. What's the contribution of oil to our revenue as at 2014? It's less than 5%. So I think we are not going to base the poverty or prosperity of our people on the 5% contribution of oil. So there are so many things that are contributing to what is generating revenue for Nigeria. So, and I think those are the areas where we need to strengthen. The fact that as long as we continue to hike the price up to the roof, and we are expecting that we are reducing poverty, I can bet you the more of that we do, the more poor people become. So if, for example, somebody who is taking 200,000 naira in a month had to go to work and is paying 200,000, he can't even save. And if people can't say there's no investment, if people cannot invest, then of course, what are you saying? Even the very rich with themselves become very poor. And I think that if we are addressing poverty issues, we must look at that macro environment where those poverty is happening. And I think those are the issues that is being spoken to at the moment. Number one, encourage local production of things that you can do within your environment. Then, of course, you don't need to import. Number two is the fact that if you're going to import, and we know that logistics is a huge cost. Even I remember in 2022, Joe Biden had to cry out against the shipping companies in Europe, how they have doubled prices and skyrocketed inflation globally because of the way they were managing the outcome of COVID-19 in determining who get a vessel and who not get a vessel. A vessel that was waiting for $4,000 before now went as far as $15,000 to $17,000, and they were making more profit in one single year that they have ever made than when they were established. These are the issues on the table, and these are the things that have to be addressed. How do we drive prices down so that we can reduce poverty and create prosperity? Then, of course, you will have peace globally.
Okay, I think Nigeria needs to come out clear on what it describes or defines as prosperity. is the prosperity of the government, does it translate to the prosperity of the man in the streets? No. So if there is excess production of oil globally and the price crashes, I think it is good for the common man in Nigeria.
Good, you said if there is excess.
Yes, and I think that's where we are heading. So it's good for the common man in the streets because it will increase his purchasing power. We'll have lots of it in circulation, and who knows, we could then be saying, okay, this is resulting to the wealth of the man on the street, because marketers will now have to make sure that they are buying in a particular specific rate, and it's the rate which they buy to reflect locally. Even at the moment now, Nigerian companies that are marketers that are buying locally from the NNPCL, and they are getting it not in dollars, but also in Naira, because Mr. President has made that declaration. And I think that will be the right direction. So if the oil price skyrockets, I will remember when it was 81, and if it goes to 85 or 86, the government becomes rich and gets more richer, and that money comes into the coffers of the government. Okay, if it comes at excess to the government and we are producing the 2 million and we are selling at that specific rate, that money that comes into the coffers of the government, will it translate to the good of the people? Example is this: the government removed subsidy, and as a result of that, what's being allocated to states has increased in double digits, and that is even that's where the debate is, if the state governors have been able to use these resources judiciously so that the man on the streets will have some form of leverage and say, okay,
so
we have
this leverage that we're talking about for the man on the streets to have.
I want to go with that perspective.
How would the man on the streets get the leverage? So because what we seem to be wanting to take off the chain.
You interjected. Wait. The reason why I would say we translate to the man, the common man, the good for the common man on the street is this: you have to know, and I think you know, that oil, petrol, premium motor spirit is almost attached to every aspect of life in this country.
Yes.
Whenever the price goes up, the prices of goods and services, transportation goes up, because the man is talking about the farmer who needs to ferry his produce from the farms down to the cities, the manufacturer who needs to take these goods. They are all affected by the price of this commodity, premium motor spirit, and we are still trying to get out of it since the removal of fuel subsidy. And if that is the case, the crashing of the oil price, if it leads to reduction in transportation alone, it will affect almost like 80% of the life of Nigerians,
because we are still importing more,
not just importation,
because we are still
importation.
We are still importing petroleum products. We are just beginning to have refineries now that are producing some quantity.
The importation is to supplement for the
local
product.
That's what I'm saying. Because we are still importing much of the petroleum products that we consume. That's why when the price of petrol, the price of crude oil goes up, it affects us directly, because we would need to import petroleum products at a higher rate. That's where the problem is. Now, you're talking about crashing the price, translating to ease for the common man, because when the price of petrol is reduced, it affects everything. Twice now, the price of premium motor spirits have been reduced. Have you felt the effect yet?
Oh, no. If you wait, okay.
Because sometimes we're not taking into consideration
if you go into that aspect, of the of that conversation.
Let's look at that. We need to get to that aspect of the conversation. Now, have you gotten the effect yet?
Listen.
When
we're talking about
optimal capacity
the local production, you and I are fully aware that even the Warri refinery that we are talking about, the producing is below 50%.
That is why we're importing more, and the import is what is making us feel that
is going to continue for the while. And remember that when we import in foreign currency, we import in dollars. So you do not expect any change or a brief change or the marginal change to translate to that positive.
I don't think you know the country you live in enough.
I'm Nigerian.
I'm not sure that you were very well aware of the realities yet.
No. But Blessing, I think it's simple arithmetic.
Yes, simple arithmetic on paper, but not in reality.
No, on reality,
it is not yet.
It's simple. You see, what you're talking about is that the way you look at the pricing, you think just about petrol.
I picked that because that's a common factor that affects everybody.
Because you also need to realize that there are also related services that are tied to petrol. As gases prices gets up, the price of your electricity gets higher. The cost of logistics gets higher, even locally, without importing. So what people are is, if these prices are going high and the people are not empowered to pay, even local companies folds up.
The reason we feel that effect is because
just wait,
we are not producing enough of those things locally.
Just put this thing in.
I am putting them. It's very simple too.
I'm not talking about what is important. I'm talking about what is produced. If, for example, I'm packing Ijebu Gari, that's what I'm packing, and I'm going to sell one cup at 2,000, I don't need to import it. The prices, the international prices of petrol, is not just affecting cost of transportation alone. What you're seeing is that it affects almost every cost, because energy suppliers are going to rely on international prices to supply energy to you locally. So even if you are going to sell crude to your company, you are selling it at international market price because you are a signatory to a treaty. What that means is that if the people on the street who will supposedly buy from this local factory don't have the buying power, what that means is that whatever that is produced by that factory, I'm not talking about what is imported, nobody will be able to buy it. And if there's no patronage, those companies get off business. The more those companies get off business, the more unemployed people you have locally. So you have to look at the effect of global oil prices. And that is why since 1974, America has been looking for alternative to crude. So this whole idea about greening is not something that has to do with the environment. It has something to do with the petrodollar crisis that came since 1974. And what is the world saying? That the more the price of energy go up, the more life become meaningless and unbearable. And if we must address the issue of poverty globally, then of course the price of energy becomes very critical. And how are we going to do that is by simply moderating and removing the monopoly or oligopoly within the system, that they are free trade and people are allowed to do what they want to do. Either prices go up or go down, and then at the end of the day you are able to address the real issue, which is poverty. Now once poverty reduces, people have something to live for. They will not die for causes that are not worldwide. So there's a link between poverty and international conflict. So what you are looking at is that by the time you are dealing with poverty issues locally, the chances of people surrendering themselves to be used as instruments for global insecurity also will reduce. And I think that is what is on the table. Yes, you can make more money for government, but
let me quickly respond to what you said. I am well aware of what you're talking about. What I'm saying to both of you here, and what I'm saying here is this: Nigeria cannot afford to do that right now. You talked about petrol. I use that because that's a common product that everybody uses and affects everything. Let's even go to gas that you're talking about. The reason we are feeling this effect more is because these products we're talking about, whether petroleum products, whether gas or whatever, a lot of it are not refined here. We are still having a lot of importation of them to complement.
Gas is refined in Europe and it's expensive. Gas is refined in America and it's expensive.
A lot of it is not refined here. How much of gas deposit do we have here? That's also a factor. That's also a factor. For now, we cannot afford to do that.
What you are talking about because we have a whole lot of arbitrary system that's happening globally.
If prices come down.
And this is the issue. That of course, if you are going to produce anything anything, what determines the price of what you produce? It's not whether you're buying it abroad or buying it locally. What determines the price is the cost of your input. And one of the cost of that input is the cost of the crude. Now, if the cost of crude is going up, it affects the
cost of production.
That's where we as a people will then need to rearrange the way we do things.
So how do you now address?
Hold on, you allow me make my point because you are not giving me. No, you are not allowing me talk. You are not allowing me respond to what I want to say.
Now, how do you deal with the worker?
So
whose salary remain constant?
That's why you need to. You need to allow me to speak. Because when government has less revenue, it's the same government that will say we cannot even increase your wage because we're having less revenue. It's the same government that will say we do not have money to embark on certain projects because revenue has dropped. We would have that as a problem. So let's look at it holistic and stop talking about, oh, the common man, like we don't know what happens. How long will it take for that common man to feel the effect? When government has less revenue, you and I know that the economy suffers for it as well. That same common man that you are saying, when prices drop, will be able to afford things, will have buying power, will also be affected. When NLC was asking for government to increase their revenue, government could only increase at a certain point based on their revenue. So when that revenue drops further, will NLC be able to say increase revenue? Will government be able to pay for some of the things that it needs to pay for because revenue has dropped? Government still gets much revenue from oil. So let's balance and think of both sides.
Hello, I need to come in here.
The 240 million people in Nigeria are taking salary from government.
But don't government play a large role there?
But what you have forgotten is that all the states and local governments and federal government worker combined is not up to 10 million.
So why then, when there was a clamor for the increase of wage, did we put that argument forward to say it is just...
You are not allowing me to comment.
No, let's deal with
that. Just a moment, doctor, just a moment. Can you do that in 30 seconds? Can you do that in 30 seconds?
Yes.
Okay.
All the workforce of federal government, state government, local government, they are not up to 10 million. And we have a population of what do you call it?
About 219.
200 million. Let's put it on the average. Now, what you're saying is that when salary is increased for less than 10 million people, it will rub off on the rest of the people. It will definitely not. So what the point I'm making to you is that there are a lot of people who are not relying on government revenue, and all they rely on is what they can produce on daily basis. So you have to factor that into your conversation.
I am factoring that, and that's why I'm saying it cannot happen now.
Money increasing for government does not necessarily translate to money increasing for the common man who is on the street, who have no job, who is looking for how to survive, want to move from place to place to submit application. They cannot.
Well, you know that when government has less revenue, government will charge the people more. So what the people are getting, they will also pay back to government.
Yes, but that is what Donald Trump has just said. Reduce your taxes, reduce your rates,
I think,
of course, reduce prices.
Great. Thank you very much.